The 32-bit generation of consoles was rife with fighting games. Not just in 3D, but in 2D as well. Arcade-perfect 2D to be more precise. During the 16-bit era, Capcom's Street Fighter series had been ported to the cartridge-based Super Famicom/Super Nintendo and Sega Mega Drive/Genesis. But these ports came with compromises, namely in sound effects and background music, so as to get around each console's limitations. Even the Sega CD didn't get a Street Fighter game, though the very first Street Fighter did get ported to the PC Engine CD-ROM/TurboGrafx CD, the first in the franchise to be ported to a CD-based platform. In 1994, Super Street Fighter II Turbo was ported to the 3DO. It's considered to be one of the better games on the ill-fated platform, but considering the 3DO's slow sales, Capcom shifted their focus to the Sony PlayStation and Sega Saturn while still supporting Nintendo's platforms. The 32-bit consoles were fighting a close battle in Japan, while the PlayStation was way ahead of the Saturn in the West. Most of the success in Japan came from Capcom's arcade ports, namely Street Fighter. Among them was Street Fighter Collection, a compilation of 3 games in the franchise. The Sega Saturn version of Street Fighter Collection was released on September 18, 1997 in Japan and December 16, 1997 in North America, alongside the PlayStation version in the same region. PAL regions also got a release on the 2 systems the next year, along with the Japanese PlayStation version. The PAL versions were published by Virgin Interactive. Each version comes in 2 discs. Disc 1 contains Super Street Fighter II and Super Street Fighter II-X, aka Super Street Fighter II Turbo. Disc 2 contains Street Fighter 02-, aka Street Fighter Alpha 2 Gold, an updated version of Street Fighter Alpha 2. For this review, I'm playing the Sega Saturn version of the game. Let's look at Disc 1 first. What differs this version from Super Street Fighter II, along with the others, from the arcade version is that you have the option to adjust the difficulty in case what they give you out of the box is too much for you. As you know, this is a port of the CPS2 arcade version. You get to choose from one of 16 different characters: Ryu, Ken, Chun-Li, Guile, Blanca, Zangief, E. Honda, Dhalsim, Balrog, Vega, Sagat, M. Bison, Fei Long, DJ, T-Hawk, and Cammy. You play a series of best-of-3 matches, and each opponent you defeat moves you to the next match until you take on M. Bison. There's also a few bonus stages in which you beat the hell out of a car. Destroy falling and rolling kegs, and destroy burning oil drums. Aside from the difficulty adjustment, the only noticeable difference is the resolution, reduced from the CPS2's 384x224 to 352x224, filling the screen. Unfortunately, the home version makes a few trims on the sides, which is kind of a letdown. I wouldn't have minded black bars on the top and bottom. I never did when I watched DVDs in widescreen on a CRT in my childhood. Another difference is the delay at the start of each match. There's also no 8-player tournament. Despite these small differences, it's pretty much arcade perfect on both the Saturn and the PlayStation. Super Street Fighter 2X, or Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, is a major upgrade to the arcade version. The game is similar to Super Street Fighter 2, except super combos and air combos are added. And it marks the debut of secret character Akuma. Again, a few compromises had to be made, including reducing the resolution to fill the screen and a delay before each match. But on the plus side, you can adjust the difficulty as you please, as well as the turbo speed. What also differs this from the arcade version is that the enemy AI's difficulty is similar to the Japanese arcade version, even in the Western releases. It's also easier to unlock Akuma, another impressive arcade port for the 32-bit consoles. But there's one game left in this collection that really makes it stand out. Let's switch to disc 2. Street Fighter 02, or Street Fighter Alpha 2, was previously released on the Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation, as well as the Super Famicom or Super Nintendo, believe it or not, published by Nintendo outside of Japan. As the sequel to the prequel to Street Fighter 2, more characters were added to the roster, such as Dhalsim and Zangief from Street Fighter 2, Gen from the original Street Fighter, Rolento from Final Fight, and Sakura, a newcomer to the series who's Ryu's biggest fan. What this upgrade improves on is that Cammy is unlockable and playable in the Versus mode, and in the Saturn version only, the training mode. Chun-Li also gets her original outfit back from Street Fighter 2. There's also an Akuma mode, or Goki mode, where you can fight Shin Akuma right off the bat. But beware, Shin Akuma is an absolute beast, no matter how you set the difficulty. Again, like the other two games in this collection, the resolution was compressed, though it's hardly noticeable in this case. Capcom did an excellent job with these tweaks, and ultimately, the whole collection. If you ask me, the Sega Saturn version of this upgrade is truly the definitive version of Street Fighter Alpha 2. Too bad Cammy isn't a playable character in the arcade mode. Thankfully, they made up for that in the PS2 port and in the third game, but we'll talk about those another time. The Street Fighter collection received admiring reviews, but some reviewers were disappointed with the game selection. Some claimed that including Alpha 2 in the collection was not a good marketing choice, since a well-acclaimed standalone disc had already been released for the Saturn and PlayStation a year prior. GameSpot's Jeff Gerstmann was especially harsh, stating, "The result is a shallow package that should have been so much more." Despite these criticisms, Electronic Gaming Monthly and Sega Saturn magazine gave both versions a high rating. EGM rated the Saturn version 8.6 out of 10, slightly over the PlayStation version. They also gave it several accolades in their 1997 Editor's Choice Awards, including runner-up for Saturn Game of the Year. I'd also like to point out that Street Fighter Zero-Two Dash received a standalone release on the Saturn and PlayStation, both in Japan only. So which version of the game do I prefer? Definitely the Sega Saturn version. After all, it's as close to arcade perfect as it can get. But don't you think it could have done so much more with a 4MB RAM cartridge? Maybe even the 1MB RAM cartridge could have helped. Oh well, life goes on. Of course, today you have numerous compilations on modern platforms, so this review might not mean much to those who don't collect. And speaking of collecting, if you're thinking of owning a copy of Street Fighter Collection, the complete Japanese versions are inexpensive, going from around $45 to $50. The North American and PAL PlayStation versions are also around that price range, but the North American and PAL Saturn versions go for around $300 each. If you just want the standalone Zero-Two Dash, the PlayStation version is way cheaper than the Saturn version, so you're better off getting the whole collection if you just want it on the Saturn. Otherwise, just get the original Zero-Two. On the other hand, there's still those bigger compilations available for today's platforms. Nevertheless, if you're a nut for the Sega Saturn, or if you just love Street Fighter, I recommend picking up Street Fighter Collection. In fact, pretty much every Capcom 2D fighting game is a great addition to your Saturn collection. Thanks again for watching Gaming Delight. Until next time, happy gaming!